Good evening and welcome to Behind Headlines, and in this programme tonight we'll be discussing how time is running out to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. We'll also approach the first anniversary of the unprecedented missile and drone attack on Israel that occurred last April. But now, could Israel be prepared to take out Iran's nuclear facilities with the help of President Trump and his administration? Reagan, we keep coming back to this topic. I don't know how many topics we've done on Behind Headlines discussing the Iranian nuclear threat, but it's been a constant thread ever since, really, from 2020, since we've been doing these programs. But it does feel like time is now really running down to actually now prevent the Iranian regime from acquiring nuclear weapons. And when the regime says that they want to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, we have to look back at history to realize that the likes of Hitler and the Nazis meant it, they said it. The same with this Iranian regime. And that's why the world and Israel can't afford for the Iranian regime to reach nuclear breakout.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that's been long-standing. It goes beyond the past 5 years. There's been concerns for decades over Iran's pursuit of nuclear capability and development of nuclear warheads. And it's only, though, in the past couple of years that we've seen the reported capability to achieve nuclear breakout within a very short space of time. I mean, we did a program only a bit over a year ago that was where we heard some expert testimony saying they may even be only a couple of weeks away. But the problem is, when it comes to any discussion involving an enemy state, when it comes to any discussion involving an Islamic state, which involves the cultural ideology and principle of al-Taqiyya, which is essentially you can lie and you can say whatever you want to, and to deceive, or to even sort of in a more positive sense, kind of smooth troubled waters, so to speak. There's no real knowledge as to, there's some knowledge, but there's no confirmed knowledge as to how far along Iran is. It's believed that they are very, very close. Israeli and U.S. intelligence has believed that for some time as well. But Iran has routinely given these figures and has routinely publicized their ability to be imminent. Are we going to be having the same conversation a year from now, that they're only days from nuclear breakout? I don't know, but that's why we have to go behind the headlines.
Well, maybe a lot of credit goes to the Israeli Mossad and others for actually putting and pushing back the Iranian regime.
There's a lot of disruption
of nuclear weapons. So whether this is the assassination of Iranian nuclear scientists, whether this is putting tables in the Iranian nuclear site in Natanz and having that kind of blow up the nuclear reactor, whether it's using Semtex virus to destroy their computer system, which then destroys the nuclear weapons program. Time will only tell. But once the regime tests the nuclear weapon, that's it. There's no going back. There is no way of reversing Iran's nuclear weapons program. So I think every week, every month is critical. And of course, we have open negotiations between the US Trump administration and the Iranian regime. Now, we have got a scripture for Behind Headlines today, 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4 and 5, that says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity, into obedience to Christ." So what we are facing here is not flesh and blood, but against that principality, that prince of Persia which is satanic in wanting to destroy the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. So this fits in very much into the kind of end times scenario the Bible has said, when the Jewish people will return back to ancient homeland and be in the ancient land. And the weapons that we have faced are not carnal as the world's, but they are mighty and powerful in God to bring down and cast down those arguments and every high thing that exalts itself above the name of Yeshua HaMashiach.
And this is where it's so important, Simon, that we recognize, even though there's a physical, tangible outworking of this, we are involved primarily in a spiritual war. And so while there's a very physical outworking of the spiritual at this stage and at this point in time, there always is, ultimately we are assured of victory. So let's suppose Iran does achieve nuclear breakout. It achieves nuclear breakout because the Lord has, in his sovereign plan and purpose, allowed that to happen for the sake of his glory and the ultimate good of his people. And so it's one of those situations we are responsible, the kingdoms of earth are responsible to pursue what is good, right, and true, just as every individual is, to seek to impede the progress of evil and seek to stand against what is detrimental and destructive. And this would be something that's an incredible evil. Iran definitely has, the Iranian regime has this attitude and this pursuit of action that desires to see Israel erased from the surface of the earth. It is completely saturated with hatred of the Jewish people, and has shown that even as we are now at the anniversary of that first time in Iran's history that we saw a massive direct missile launch against Israel.
Absolutely, and so that takes us back to the 13th of April 2024, when the Islamic Republic of Iran, for the first time in its history, launched a direct missile and drone attack on Israel. They launched over 300 rockets and missiles, together with drones, and these included ballistic and cruise missiles against Israel. So 1 year on, we have a new president in power in the White House, President Trump, a new administration, a more hawkish administration, and in that sense as well, that Israel is preparing now, possibly within weeks, to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, knowing that Israel doesn't have to worry so much about the Iranian response, because Israel over the past year has taken out that ring of fire that the Iranian regime has built up against Israel, namely their terror proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah. We've seen a change of regime in Syria, so they can't use Syria as a means to attack Israel. The Americans are currently taking out the Houthis in southern Lebanon. So the Iranian response to a potential attack on its nuclear facilities would have been devastating this time last year. But now, since that collapse of Hezbollah and Hamas, the Iranian options for retaliation are quite limited in comparison to last year anyway.
In any war context, strategy is incredibly important, and what Israel has had to do, what the United States has had to do, is log the offense and respond in a limited capacity, which was done, and we even did a report on disabling of a nuclear facility as a result of the retaliatory strikes. There were multiple publicized and ultimately publicized, but at first unpublicized strikes that Israel was able to carry out that Iran could not admit to or acknowledge initially, because they were strikes on sites that according to the rest of the world, were not supposed to have existed. They didn't seemingly exist. And so we saw immense strategic prowess on behalf of the IAF and those in Israel.
Back in October.
Absolutely, back in October. But that was not the end of it. And we've seen Iran in its complicity routinely. You've mentioned Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis in Syria as well, activity. It's continued onslaught against not only its own people, but against the Israeli nation. And what is going to have to happen, what seems to, much to the chagrin of Jew haters around the world, and all sorts of people who are only out for themselves, there's a lot of outcry I'm seeing over the very prospect of the U.S. Aiding Israel in such a strike, but it's an essential strike that, unless there is something massive that changes, it must happen.
Absolutely. So this week, the Sun newspaper reported that a military airstrike on Iran's nuclear facilities could just be a matter of weeks away. President Trump has issued an ultimatum and set a deadline for the Mullahs in Iran to reach an agreement regarding the dangerous nuclear weapons program. And if they fail to do so, they will face the full force of Israeli airstrikes supported by the US military. According to the Sunday Times, the Iranian regime has enriched enough uranium to produce 6 nuclear weapons and is only months away from reaching the point of atomic breakout. This weekend, the US administration started its direct negotiations with the Iranian regime in Oman over its dangerous nuclear weapons program. And as we said at the start of the program, time is running out on Iran's nuclear program. And could we see Israel strike within weeks?
And I think that the problem on the Iranian side is, to some degree, it's had a period of reprieve. It would have seen the Biden years as years of reprieve because there was this deal that was being worked on and everything seemed to be being ignored, really, in relation to their action. We can remember Biden urging Israel not to respond, and I remember the expression, take the win, being used.
Yes, that was David Cameron's expression when he was our foreign minister at the time.
Exactly, and this was being bandied about both in the UK among various politicians. Cameron was the one who coined the expression, and in the US, you should take the win. What win? Having thousands of rockets being fired on your people. The only win there is God in His goodness allowed the Iron Dome and other security measures to work in an unprecedented level. There's always a level of failure. There's always something that gets through. On this occasion, we saw something miraculous essentially occur with thousands of rockets, missiles, and drones fired on Israel. There was no real damage in any lasting way. And so any retaliation as a result of that was discouraged. Now, Simon, let's suppose there's a resurrection, God forbid, of the IRA. The IRA, en masse support of the Irish people, begins to fire thousands of rockets. They get the bunkers open that have allegedly held all of this ammunition and stuff. Everything is opened up, and they start firing ballistic missiles or something over, using drones. They've been building things behind our back as such. Thousands of destructive weapons are fired over onto our shores. But we don't, but let's suppose we have a security system that intercepts it all. Do you think we would just blink and say, we'll take the win on this? I don't think so. I think there would be a boots on the ground response. There would be an immediate invasion.
Yeah, no, and we also had at the time the Israeli President Herzog actually say that this is a direct declaration of war,
yes,
on behalf of the Iranian regime back then. So the fact that Israel just took out some strategic air defense systems and air defense missiles was saying a point, because Israel was very much curtailed by any real meaningful response because of the Biden administration, because they know they need US help and assistance to actually destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, which moves us on to the top story that the Sun newspaper reported literally on the 13th of April 2025 under this headline. On the brink, US and Israel blitz on Iran is just weeks away as Trump's nuke deadline nears, and it will be just the first blow. They say that Israel will do whatever it takes to stop Iran's nuclear strength, an ex-military intelligence agent has warned. Sources in Tel Aviv say Israel is poised to blitz Iran within weeks in a coordinated effort with the US if Tehran fails to thrash out a nuclear deal. But Dr. Raz Zamit, who works for the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, focuses on Iran and said it would require a long process to properly downgrade Tehran's nuclear capabilities. He said not just one attack. Iran no doubt would retaliate by striking Israel as it did last April with a huge barrage of missiles and drones after several officers were killed in an assault on Damascus consulate in Syria. He goes on to say that an Iron Dome operator in Israel's north told The Sun that they do not fear a bombardment from Iran, as they say they are 200% prepared. We have dealt with attacks from before. We know how to deal with them again, says the technical sergeant Tazik Yawai. So it does prove that Israel, I think, is facing a far different scenario than she did a year ago. You know, the collapse of the Iranian wall of fire against Israel, the fact that we're not going to see retaliatory strikes on behalf of the Hamas or Hezbollah because they've been taken out. No Iranian guards or proxies will be able to attack Israel from Syria, which means that Israel is in a much stronger position now than she was last year, particularly with the backing of the Trump administration to finally put an end to Iran's nuclear facilities and nuclear ambitions once and for all.
Well, now Dr. Zimt, who's a senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Studies, has warned that the next 2 or 3 months are crucial as Donald Trump has found his mind invoked to a place of rage because of Ayatollah Khamenei's basically this bandying about back and forth. There's a 2-month deadline that has been given by President Donald Trump to the Ayatollah to reach an agreement on Tehran's nuclear scheme or to face a very strong and severe consequence, which is, of course, bombing. Dr. Zimt has said it is likely Israel and the U.S. will consider blitzing Iran within weeks, telling the Sun newspaper we're at the closest point of reaching the possibility of either Israeli or an American attack against Iran. If there is no understanding or certainly agreement between the two sides by late June, July, I think the prospects for military confrontation will be very high. What's going to happen in the next few weeks and months, mostly between Iran and the U.S., will certainly have a major impact on the trajectory and decision whether we are going to face a military strike.
He also went to say that we are much closer than anyone can be comfortable with in terms of Iran developing its nuclear weapons. They claim that Tehran will soon be in a position to enrich enough uranium to 233 to produce several fusion weapons by the end of this month. So it shows that really that despite the fact we've seen different administrations in the United States, and despite the fact we've seen the near collapse of the Islamic Republic of Iran with a massive great protest, the collapse of the Iranian Shia Crescent and its domination in the Middle East, namely its jewel in its crown, Hezbollah, the Iranian regime still hasn't paused and stopped for a moment. It's just continued to pursue its nuclear weapons ambition relentlessly.
And in recent years, as a result of various discoveries, as a result of some of those actions taken against Iran previously, it has adopted a very cloak and dagger approach to its ongoing pursuit of these weapons. But what we've seen in recent years is that Iran has limited inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Its regime has secretly, unsurprisingly, with that limitation going on, been building nuclear warheads for missiles that can fire more than 3,000 kilometers, which is an incredible space of time and within easy reach of Israel.
And also Europe as well,
yeah.
And going into kind of North Africa and even Russia as well, so their capabilities are scary. So also says the Sun reports that satellite pictures uncovered 3 sites that the Iranian leaders claim were being used as part of a space initiative. Dr. Zimt said the only way Iran's nuclear program could ever be close to being wiped out would be through constant airstrikes. He added, it's very clear that even if there is a successful airstrike, either by Israel or the US, it won't be possible to eliminate 100% of their nuclear capabilities and facilities and fusion material in just one or even several attacks. it will probably require the continuation of either military or other kinds of activities in order to make sure that Iran doesn't have the capability to reconstitute its program after such attack. He says it comes as a trump this week. Israel will be the leader of a potential strike against Iran. He made the comments ahead of this weekend's scheduled talks involving US and Iranian officials in the Middle East at the Senate of the Sultanate of Oman, where the president has said the following: if it requires military, we're going to have military. Israel will obviously be very much involved in that. They will be the leader of that, but nobody leads us, but we do what we need to do.
Iran continues to accelerate its nuclear development, and unless there is some deal that's reached, I don't believe that there's going to be a deal that's reached. I don't believe there's going to be a staving off of this, despite the U.S. calling for it. I think Iran recognizes it has its own sense of honor, which is not very honorable, but its own sense of honor to defend, and it's increasingly lost credibility. It's experienced extreme losses and its power grip across the Middle East in the past year and a half. It's known great internal conflict and struggle. In its own mind, the regime has to show its power, and it has to show it is not weak. And so I don't believe they're going to be giving in to any demands or any deal. And this will, I believe, also lead to its destruction.
They might do if they feel that, that their regime can survive. Because there was a great article in this week's Sunday Times with Pahlavi, the son of the Shah of Iran, where he essentially argued that now has never been more of a right time for regime change in Iran. So if the Iranian regime feels like its days are numbered, and it's a question of sacrificing its nuclear weapons program for survival, it would do so. And I think it will only come about through kind of threats. Now, the Israeli position is they want the Iranian regime to give up their nuclear weapons program, just like Libya did in 2003 after the war in Iraq, whilst the Americans are trying to maybe negotiate something slightly different, maybe pause their nuclear weapons program. But effectively, whatever happens is the world cannot allow Iran to achieve nuclear weapons. So we see here that there's an exclusive written here by Katie Davis. She is the Sun's chief foreign reporter, who wrote this. Says Iran is believed to have accelerated its nuclear weapons development and is building terrifying nuclear warheads for solid fuel missiles with a range exceeding 1,800 miles or 3,000 kilometers. Says a powerful blast from Iran could impact on several continents due to the chilling capacity of the warheads. Italy, Ukraine, Sudan, India, and even large swathes of Russia would all be potentially in its firing line. She goes on to write that they are being developed at two sites, the Shahud and Semna, which were previously pinned as rocket or space satellite launch sites. A third site, Shokoras Keshker, is also said to be carrying out projects including research on nuclear power and underground explosions. Nukes are being quickly created under the watchful eye of the regime's weaponization entity, the Organization for Advanced Defense Research. Bosses are developing nuclear warheads for the solid fuel Geshem 100 missiles, and which are equipped with mobile launch platforms at the Shahud site. So again, I think what we've unpacked before, haven't we, Reagan, is the fact that the Iranian regime has claimed it has a space program with rockets to launch into space, but this is a direct cover for Iran's nuclear weapons program.
Yeah, and it's one of those scenarios that I think we have seen many times before, and this is part of that that covering that Iran has been very good at, admittedly, in one way, in that they've continued to develop, they've continued to kind of stave off any international condemnation or action outside, of course, of Israel and the U.S. They continue to present themselves as a legitimate power. I mean, we've had for many years now Iran's president and even the Ayatollah speak at UN events. So, you know, this is an evil regime that is destroying its own people, that is lended credibility and given a voice by leading international organizations, even though it has no legitimacy.
No, it doesn't have any legitimacy, and we can see that from the Iranian people themselves. So let's have a look at this CBN news report that talks about how the Iranian regime is very close to a nuclear breakout, and time is running out to stop the Iranian regime, the world's most dangerous nation, requiring the world's most dangerous weapons.
The U.S.-Iran nuclear talks begin this weekend as a new report warns Iran's nuclear threat has worsened significantly. The Institute for Science and International Security warns that Iran has improved its nuclear weapons capabilities, that it takes less time to build those weapons, and that the idea of building them has gained more acceptance in Iran. The report also says the nuclear threat from Iran has increased significantly since February of last year. President Trump already warned Iran it has about 2 months to come to a deal or face military strikes.
We have a little time, but we don't have much time because we're not going to let them have a nuclear weapon. Can't let them have a nuclear weapon.
Warning that Israeli security is on the line, former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, writes the Americans could agree to a deal that lets the Iranians once again keep their nuclear facilities and centrifuges intact. Another Israeli concern is the Iranians will stall for time to finish developing such weapons and get ready to repel any attack to destroy their nuclear facilities. Iran denies it's building nuclear weapons.
We will provide whatever guarantee necessary to prove we are not seeking a nuclear bomb.
Trump has moved a massive amount of American military power into the Middle East that could strike Iran's nuclear facilities. The Iranians are trying to neutralize that threat, warning Tehran might stop cooperating with the International Atomic Energy Agency and expel its inspectors if military threats against Iran continue.
Now, of course, this has come as no surprise to Israel, as they've been preparing for months to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, with the Sun newspaper on the 2nd of April reporting under the headline, U.S. and Israel plan to unleash huge Iran blitz to destroy the Ayatollah's chilling nuke strength in long overdue attack. An IDF source told the Sun that Israeli forces have been working for months to clear the path for a major strike on Iran. And this is where, Simon, I think we have to acknowledge what's been going on in the past year, a year on from that initial attack. Really, we could go all the way back to the 7th of October. You could go back before, but the 7th of October, there was a recognition that Iran was complicit, that Iran was culpable, that it was completely and intrinsically involved in those heinous attacks on Israeli civilians. Beyond that, it has itself continued to fund terror and has itself applied terror in this assault with missiles upon Israel. Israel has strategically been playing chess here. It's not gone all out, gunning for the Ayatollah right away, but it's moved its pieces on the chessboard, so to speak, in a very, very strategic way, ready to accomplish what will be a decisive, definitive strike.
Checkmate.
Checkmate.
I think that's where we're heading for.
Yeah.
The Sun also then actually quotes from an Israeli perspective that with Trump in the White House, this represents the optimum moment to deal with Iran. There won't be a better chance. Says obtaining precise intelligence on just how far Iran's nuclear program has advanced has always been hard to obtain. But the reality is there is much closer than anyone can be comfortable with, and they've been doing it for some time. They said, as Reagan quoted as well from the Sun newspaper, that since Hamas's barbaric assault on October the 7th, 2023, Israel has come under fire from Lebanon's Hezbollah and the Yemen's Houthis. Iran has long used its terror proxies to do its dirty work. But a source from the IDF told the Sun newspaper that Tehran is now many steps back, as Israeli forces have been working for months to clear the path for a major strike on Iran. They told how 3 air campaigns in Iran have eliminated most aerial defense systems, which were the main obstacle. The IDF insider said it was worked to significantly downgrade the threat posed by Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis, effectively leaving Iran isolated. And they told the Sun that over the past year, we struck in Yemen 3 or 4 times. We had 3 air campaigns in Iran, eliminating on the way most of the aerial defense systems in Syria, Iraq and Iran. They were the main obstacles when thinking about a big operation on the way to Iran, their proxy aerial defense system. So it seems like, as you're saying, a great analogy, using a kind of chessboard. And I think the IDF now is in a position where they are approaching checkmate. They know that the Iranian time is running out to stop the Iranian nuclear weapons program. But this time they have the American backing from it. And that's the different scenario, and they need that American capabilities. They need those American bunker busting bombs to destroy Iran's nuclear sites. And it's not like Israel, when Israel bombed the Osrink nuclear site in Iraq in 1982, I believe, or 81, or the same time when they took out the Syrian nuclear site in 2008, because the Iranians have got wise. They have spread their nuclear weapons program all over Iran. So it's just not one single site. Many of these are actually under mountains, and they've tried to hide and conceal what they've done. So it's going to take a multi-strike, and it's going to take American help and logistics in order to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. And this is something that, again, it did not have in a full way. It had some verbal support to a degree, yes, some munition support, but it was quite a double-faced support over the years from the Biden administration. Now we have President Trump giving an ultimatum, which was something that Biden did not do, with the Iranian regime, saying, according to the Daily Telegraph, on the 30th of March, I'll bomb Iran if it rejects my nuclear deal, giving the supreme leader, so to speak, the deadline of 2 months to agree over Tehran's nuclear program. Donald Trump has warned Iran that there would be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before if it rejects his nuclear weapons deal. The threat comes after the U.S. president sent a letter to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, giving him a deadline of 2 months to come to an agreement over the country's nuclear program. On Sunday, he told NBC in a phone call, if they don't make a deal, there will be a bombing, and it will be bombing the likes of which they have never seen before. While Mr. Trump has said that a diplomatic solution to the Iran nuclear problem is preferable, military means are still on the table. On Friday, speaking at the Oval Office, he warned, I sent them a letter just recently and I said you have to make a decision one way or the other, and we either have to talk it out or very bad things are going to happen to Iran. I don't want that to happen. My big preference, and I don't say this through strength or weakness, is we work it out with Iran. But if we don't work it out, bad things are going to happen to Iran.
And according to the Telegraph article as well, they quote confidential United Nations report says that the increase in Iran's holdings of uranium enriched to 60% or nearly weapons grade gives it enough to produce 6 nuclear weapons. The Wall Street Journal reported. The report said that Iran was now producing enough fusion material in a month for 1 nuclear weapon, but Tehran maintains its nuclear weapon is peaceful. If it was peaceful, then they wouldn't need to enrich uranium. And the Iranian regime is also the 4th richest country when it comes to natural oil and natural gas, and therefore they are not energy insufficient. So therefore, to say that they need nuclear power for civilian purposes is just nothing but a lie and deception. But also we see that the Telegraph reported on the 12th of April under the following headline: Iran and US hold constructive talks over nuclear deal. It says Trump's envoy held a brief meeting with Tehran's foreign minister in Amman after second round of negotiations is agreed. Now, the Trump administration achieved something that the Biden administration couldn't do very effectively, and that was to produce direct talks between the US government and also the Iranian regime on its nuclear weapons facility. So the fact that these talks are now taking place in Amman is an indication that the Iranians take the American threat, or the threat by Donald Trump, extremely seriously.
Well, they definitely do, but this is a complete shift because only in March we saw Masoud Pezeshkian, the president, say that the Islamic Republic had rejected the option of direct talks with the U.S. And this was Tehran's first response to Trump's letter via mediators, but now we're seeing, they've realized they have no choice here. They've seen some of the, the detriment that can befall nations that come under the displeasure of the new administration in the U.S. Trump's envoy has held brief meetings with Tehran's foreign minister already in Amman after a second round of negotiations has been agreed, with the United States and Iran continuing talks aimed at securing a deal to limit Tehran's nuclear program following constructive preliminary discussions in Amman. Steve Witkoff held brief direct talks with Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister in Amman, the White House said on Saturday. The U.S. envoy had favored face-to-face negotiations, while it is understood Iran proposed the initial exchanges were conducted by intermediaries. According to the White House statement, the discussions were very positive and constructive. Special Envoy Witkoff underscored to Dr. Araghchi that he had instructions from President Trump to resolve over our two nations' differences through dialogue and diplomacy, if that is possible, according to the White House. Tehran said the talks were held in a constructive and mutually respectful atmosphere, with Mr. Araghchi signaled Tehran was open to a limited agreement that would curtail its enrichment of uranium in exchange for a release of sanctions that have crippled the Iranian economy.
There are some very serious concerns, particularly regarding the U.S. Special Envoy, which is Witkoff. And this comes from the fact that Steve Witkoff is a close friend of President Trump. They're both business partners and both played golf together. His lacking of understanding of the Middle East is extremely concerning.
Very.
Plus, he's overstretched. So he's there negotiating with the Qataris, with Hamas for the remaining Israeli hostages in Gaza. He's also flown out to Moscow to deal directly with President Putin over the Ukraine, and now he's been parachuted in to be the main negotiator in talks with the Iranian regime. Now, what concerns me in particular is how he views the Qataris, as he believes that they are a mutual ally of the United States and someone they can do business with, and taking the fact that the Qataris and Hamas are spiritually aligned because they are both representatives of the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, I would have thought that President Trump would have brought in an Iranian expert to realize how crafty and deceitful the Iranians are in terms of negotiation, someone who knows about Iran, someone knows about how they negotiate, and also knows how to actually deal with the Iranians. So my fear is that the Iranians will go along with the negotiations as they will kind of spin the West and the American administration for as long as it possibly takes in order for them to achieve nuclear breakout. They'll make some concessions here and then some concessions there, and then it'll be too late, because we know that without US backing, there is no way that President Trump will give Israel the green light to take out Iran's nuclear facilities to prevent them from having the world's most deadliest weapon.
Well, frankly, my perspective is that Israel doesn't need to wait for the green light from the US, regardless of its alliance. You know, it stands before God in its place of rightness or wrongness, and it must make the decision that's best for the Israeli populace. But that is the common perspective, that Israel would dare not go against the approval of the U.S. on such a matter, although it has done against the Biden administration on a couple of occasions.
This is different. We can see how Trump has just turned the international world order upside down.
Absolutely.
And
he's in control.
And he could face the wrath of Israel could face the wrath of the White House in doing that, endangering that strategic relationship. But also, I don't think Israel has the full military capabilities to do it. They need American US bunker bombs in order to do it. Plus, they also need a prolonged campaign to take out Iran's nuclear weapons. That's what makes this situation so difficult and why they're so dependent upon the US.
So Witkoff has said that the US red line, he's spoken of these red lines, is no weaponization of Iran's nuclear program. So what he's saying is go ahead and continue your nuclear program. That's fine. Just don't make weapons. That's his red line. We've had Emily Schrader on the program on several occasions now, and her take on Steve Witkoff is that he is dangerously naive and should be removed from his position. This is the...
doesn't hold back, does it?
No mincing of words here. Witkoff doesn't even know what the red lines of the U.S. are, and he's making ignorant statements such as this, while his meetings with Iran and the regime are paraded on the world stage as a success for the regime. He is giving them an extension to continue nuclear proliferation at non-civilian levels. And it goes on to describe the naivety of it and reminds that Witkoff has previously made the claim, bizarrely, that Hamas is ideologically movable. You've mentioned concerns over his understanding of the Middle East. He doesn't have any understanding of the Middle East. He doesn't understand the religious component to this. Hamas is not ideologically movable because the teaching of the Quran and the base foundation of Islamic theology is not ideologically movable. It is an objective point of fact, and its charter in demanding for the eradication of Jews from the land and restoration of Palestine is ideologically consistent. So that was problematic as it is, and has already discredited his knowledge to some degree in relation to Iran. He goes on to, Emily Schrader rather, goes on to say that the idea that he thinks only the weaponization of the nuclear program is the core issue proves that he has no idea what he's talking about. The Islamic regime has been enriching uranium above levels for any civilian purpose for a very long time. Firstly, there should be no deal, but secondly, a deal that doesn't demand the complete deconstruction of Iran's nuclear program is a complete non-starter. Not to mention the fact that Witkoff is implying that billions of dollars that have been funneled into terrorist proxies that have killed American citizens all over the world would not be part of such a deal. So it's quite a damning verdict on Steve Witkoff there.
Yeah, rightly so. Let's see now the Israeli Prime Minister's response to these negotiations with the Iranian regime that Americans are currently conducting in Oman. So JNS, the Jewish News Syndicate, reported on April the 8th last week that the Israeli Prime Minister, as response to direct US-Iranian talks, said the following. He said that we agree that Iran will not have nuclear weapons. This can be done by agreement, but only if this agreement is Libyan style. They go in, blow up the installations, dismantle all of their equipment under American supervision and carried out by America. This would be good. The second possibility that will not be is that they drag out the talks and then there is a military option. Everyone understands this. We spoke about it at length. So clearly we see that last week Benjamin Netanyahu was in the White House meeting with President Trump and his administration. And this was really to find out and to put maximum pressure on Trump, to imply the maximum pressure on the Iranian regime. And they've certainly been doing that by this huge, massive military build-up that could be used against the Iranian regime in nuclear strikes.
Very definitely, and we see that the UK Defence Journal has reported back in March, on March 26th, under the headline massive U.S. bomber buildup continues at Diego Garcia, that they have moved at least 7 B-2A Spirit stealth bombers to Diego Garcia, significantly expanding military presence in the remote British-controlled island in the Indian Ocean, marking a further escalation in ongoing preparations for large-scale military action, potentially targeting Houthi forces in Yemen, which they have already been doing in the early part of April. We have seen that, much to the chagrin of many pro-Hamas supporters, and as some analysts have suggested, Iranian military infrastructure. The continued buildup follows the airstrikes on Houthi targets in Yemen, described as the largest U.S. military operation in the Middle East since President Donald Trump took office in January of 2025. The U.S. seeing freedom of navigation in the Red Sea as a strategic imperative, and recent movements suggesting an effort to neutralize Houthi launch capabilities and potentially to deter Iranian interference in the wider region. The arrival of the 7th B-2A bombers raises the stakes considerably, with Diego Garcia long playing a crucial role in U.S. strategic bomber operations, having hosted B-52 and B-1 missions during the Gulf War, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Its remote location, the long runway, make it a key forward operating base for long-range operations, especially when regional basing options are constrained by diplomatic or security concerns.
Which is very troubling, because I think this is good news for Israel. This is good news for the West. The fact that we've seen such a massive military redeployment in the Indian Ocean, that can only mean one thing, that they can be deployed against the Iranian regime. But let's remind ourselves of some of the technical issues at stake if the Iranian regime were to acquire nuclear weapons, and how they can achieve nuclear weapons, thanks to this excellent video report produced by the Israeli Foreign Ministry.
Enriching uranium, the Iranian nuclear deal, centrifuges. We are constantly bombarded with endless information about Iran and its race to a nuclear bomb. But for most of us, these terms are complicated. So let's make it simple. Uranium is the chemical element used for nuclear weapons. In order to build a uranium-based nuclear bomb, you first need to amass hundreds of kilograms of uranium. You then need to enrich the uranium to a level above 90% purity using equipment called centrifuges. The enriched uranium used to create the core of the nuclear bomb is then attached to a detonating device. Now let's make it even more simple. The nuclear deal is supposed to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons capabilities. But in reality, in the last months, Iran has violated this agreement again and again and again. How? Well, first, the nuclear deal restricts the amount of uranium Iran is allowed to accumulate to 300 kilograms. Today, Iran has more than 500 kilograms of uranium. Second, Iran began enriching the uranium to levels higher than the 3.67% permitted by the agreement. Third, Iran is now feeding the uranium into centrifuges at an underground military bunker built specifically for creating nuclear weapons. Fourth, Iran is resuming nuclear research and development, bringing it closer than ever to nuclear capability. These are all violations of Iran's commitment under the nuclear deal. In November, Iran also canceled the accreditation of an IAEA inspector and prevented the organization from accessing the Natanz nuclear site. So, if you weren't convinced before, it is now clearer than ever that Iran is brazenly violating its commitments under the JCPOA. Iran is lying to the international community. And the most dangerous part of all of this is that Iran is moving faster than ever towards nuclear capability. A nuclear Iran would endanger not only Israel, but countries over 2,000 kilometers away in Africa, Asia, and Europe. The international community must act now.
Well, it's a little bit of a dated video in some ways, but the information is completely relevant to today. It's just a reminder that this has been going on for a significant period of time, and we've not really seen any meaningful development or change other than that there's now a discussion between the new administration and the Iranian regime that could potentially see some further development of nuclear capabilities deterred. But as we've already been talking about, Simon, really a deal does not necessarily put Israel in the best place in regard to its security long term.
No, well, not only Israel's security, but the security of the Middle East, the security of Europe, and also the West. Because if this Iranian regime develops nuclear weapons, then it knows that it's protected against any possible retaliatory attacks that it may instigate. It can then plant a dirty bomb through its proxies in New York or Washington or London or Paris or Rome and not face the consequences because they have nuclear weapons in order to protect the regime. So nuclear weapons preserves their regime, but also then gives them the option, if they want, to carry out a nuclear strike against Israel rather, to annihilate the Jewish state, as the former president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, vowed to do, as well as the supreme leader Khamenei, within the kind of Islamic Shia thinking that their ultimate aim is the destruction of Jerusalem, the annihilation of the Jewish people, and the return of the 12th Imam or the Mahdi. And having nuclear weapons gives them that capability of doing that. So they're not rational, in a sense that the Americans can think that they are rational, they are trustworthy, and if they make a deal, then they can keep it, because we've seen that over the entire nuclear weapons program that's been going on now for at least over a couple of decades now, the Iranian regime have been cloak and dagger, using deceptive means to cover up their nuclear facilities. And if it wasn't for Israel's involvement in Iran, they would certainly have nuclear weapons already, and that would be the game changer. But the Daily Telegraph writes an interesting article. Is this a year Trump bombs Iran? Experts tell the Telegraph that Russia and America's growing closeness, alongside with eternal dissent in Iran, could spark regime change. And that's what we all want to see. We want the people of Iran to be free of this evil and hideous regime that's done nothing but oppress their people. There's something like almost 1,000 executions in the past year against Iranian dissidents who are protesting against the state.
I think the Iranian regime is raging against its own death. I think that it's headed towards sure and certain destruction. It has crossed the line time and time again from its inception. And what we're looking at now are the death throes of its power. I do believe will collapse within the next few years. I do believe that there will be a taking out of its nuclear capability. Some might say that's optimistic, but at the same time, I do believe that we're seeing a pride on behalf of the regime that has consistently produced complete failure. And unless something dramatic changes, I think that pride will lead to its ultimate downfall.
And the Daily Telegraph article continues with the following, that on the 7th of March, Mr. Trump wrote a letter to the Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, setting a 2-month deadline for a nuclear deal to be signed. A day earlier, Israeli jets flew a joint exercise with American B-52 bombers, only one of 2 aircraft capable of delivering the bombs needed to destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities. The other aircraft were the B-52 Spirit, was used in the weekend strike against Yemen. So the fact is that we have this huge military buildup of aircraft. I know that the Americans also sent in some aircraft carriers as well, means that this is backing diplomacy with military strength. And so Iran's future and its nuclear weapons program are firmly in its own hands to decide what it wants to do. It can stretch out the negotiations as much as it can, but the reality is that it will be determined to reach nuclear breakout. But the question is, will Israel and the US intervene to stop the world's most dangerous regime achieving the world's most dangerous weapon?
Yeah, and there already is some anger and hit back within the regime at extreme criticism by some of the regime's hardliners over what they are wanting to paint as a brief chat between the U.S. emissary Witkoff and Tehran's foreign ministers. So, the first round of negotiations, however one wants to call them, that's the easy part. We're now needing to get to the meat of the matter, and essentially Iran has a choice to make. Either it continues to sit under crippling sanctions and it continues to go forward toward its own destruction, or it agrees to have these conversations. Now, without putting out ideas there for the regime, there are ways in which it can come out of this and declare some form of at least moral victory. But in many ways, it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, I believe there will be too much pride, too much arrogance, too much grandstanding from the regime that will ultimately lead to Iran's downfall.
And something that'll be really troubling Tehran, and that is the fact that Moscow will not be coming to Iran's defense in any Israeli backed up by US military airstrikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, destroying their nuclear ambitions. So again, Israel has saved the world from a nuclear annihilation. The most vile, dangerous regimes having nuclear weapons, whether they were Saddam Hussein acquiring nuclear weapons, whether Assad acquired nuclear weapons. And can you imagine the scenario facing Syria now with the onset of the ongoing civil war and the Sunni rebels getting hold of nuclear weapons? So the same thing goes for the Iranian regime, the world's most dangerous weapon. This is something that Israel cannot afford to allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. The memory of the Holocaust is too real in the minds of Israeli leaders and the minds of the IDF, and that need to protect Israel against all odds. But the great thing is that we know that Israel has a future. Israel has a destiny, and bright futures is mentioned in the book of Revelation. The Messiah of Israel is returning to Jerusalem to rule and reign his millennial kingdom. So we know that Israel's not going to be wiped off the face of the earth. Israel's not going anywhere. And those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. There's only one nation that's really being cursed right now, and it's the Iranian regime.
Yeah, the biggest threat to Israel remains the Iranian regime and its achieving of nuclear breakout in the physical sense of it anyway. Israel, though, is determined to see that that doesn't happen, and we must pray, because within weeks, essentially, there's going to be a decision that's made, and we could see the IAF being deployed to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities with, of course, U.S. military backing that will save the world from the Iranian regime threatening Israel and the world with its nuclear weapons. What that will lead to next, God knows, but we can trust him. We know that it's all in his perfect plan and purpose, and ultimately he's working it all out to the furtherance of his will and for the good of those who are his, and we look forward to that resolution.
Absolutely, good program. Thank you so much, Reagan. And also we need to be watchmen and women on the walls of Jerusalem to pray and intercede for Israel and her leaders at this crucial time in history. Thank you for watching this week's Behind the Headlines.